Now we're going to do the quotient rule. And so when we look at the quotient rule tells us that when we have a variable or integer with a power and it's being divided by another variable or integer with a power that's the same variable or integer, then we just simply subtract the powers. So let me show you what that looks like. So for instance, say that we had, for our first example, x to the 5th power. Our variable is x, right? So our base is x and our power is 5. And we have that being divided by a like variable, x, to the 2nd power. So our base is x and our power is 2. And we want to go ahead and use the quotient rule. Well, the quotient rule says that we should just subtract the powers. Well, my powers are 2 and 5. So when we subtract them, we're always going to subtract the denominator from the numerator. So let me give you an example. This statement, if we were to write an equivalent statement of the process, is actually the base of x to the power of 5 minus the power of 2. And if we further simplify that, it would give us x to the power of 3. And that's it. So you might be thinking at this point, well, you know what, I might end up with some negative powers, and that is very possible. You might end up with some negative powers, and then you'll have to use another rule to change it to a positive power, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit later. But let me give you one more example of one that looks a little bit more complicated. So let's do this other example. Okay, so let's go ahead and do, say we have one that's a little bit more fancy, and we have x squared times y to the power of 5 divided by x, which has a power of 1 because we're not going to write the power, times y to the power of 3. Okay, this one looks a little bit more complicated. So let's make an equivalent statement that shows the process. Remember, we're going to be subtracting powers. So if we're subtracting powers, I'm going to deal with my x's first because I like to deal with just one particular variable first. So I have my x squared, it's my numerator, so I'm going to go ahead and put x to the power of 2, and then I have this x down here and it's minus 1. It gets rid of my x's right here. That's the process for those. And then after that I have y to the power of 5 minus my y to the power of 3. So I'm going to cross that out and cross that out. So it's going to be y to the power of 5 minus that power of 3 that was on the bottom. Now notice I no longer have a fraction, right? Everything is just put in the numerator. I moved it up by subtracting it. That's why it's called the quotient rule. The way we move this up is by subtracting that power. So now we just have to finish the process on this. And x to the power of 2 minus 1 gives me simply x to the power of 1. Notice I'm not going to write a 1 here because I don't have to, it's implied. And then y to the power, that's times y to the power of 5 minus 3. And that gives me y to the power of 2. And that's it. This problem is done.